Kazi la BBI linaendelea kukusanya mapendekezo, maoni tu zaidi kutoka kwa wananchi. Kikao cha leo kimeweza kushuhudia wanachama wa ANC akiwemo kiongozi wa chama cha ANC Musalia Mudavadi hivi sasa akiwa anatoa maoni na mapendekezo tu kwa niaba ya wanachama wa ANC na pia pengine kwa ujumla tu kwa niaba ya baadhi ya wananchi ambao ni wafuasi wa chama hichi cha ANC. Hebu tuweze kusikiliza yanayojiri.
Pose some rhetorical questions that are very fundamental. Is the economy working for Kenyans? Is it creating jobs for the Kenyan youth? Is it encouraging the farmer? Is the tax regime in Kenya fair to the common mwananchi? These and many others questions are the ones that need to be answered if we are to achieve shared prosperity. Let me flag a few issues. One, public debt management. ANC is gravely concerned that with the country's state of debt. This is the highest and most burdensome debt book in our history since independence, and it is almost unmanageable. There is an urgent need to re-examine our debt portfolio with a view of renegotiating the terms to favorable repayment terms. The relationship between the National Treasury and the Public Debt Management Office as it stands today is incestuous. The latter ought to have a sense of independence and autonomy in the management of public debts and report to the public through Parliament on national debts, but under the current dispensation, this is not happening. It is half-hearted. So what do we propose as ANC? We propose that there should be the establishment of an independent Public Debt Management Authority with clear objects and functions, chief of which shall be managing public debt at national and county government levels. Mr. Chairman, I am happy to say that ANC is in the process of drafting legislation to implement this, and we ask the support of the committee. Two, we should put in place proper disclosure mechanisms where members of the public are periodically, perhaps even religiously, informed on the state of public debt, the loan agreements, the terms of the loan, and the state of the loan. All these continue to be shrouded in secrecy. And I'm sure all of you are now aware our public debt is running into trillions of Kenya shillings. It has serious implications. Let me say something about the tax regime. ANC strongly feels that the tax regime has become punitive, extractive, and non-responsive to spurring economic growth and job creation. This is fueled partly by corruption and the burdensome public debt I've talked about. As ANC, we recommend that the government should take deliberate steps in putting in place strategies for expanding the tax base, commensurate with the growth of the economy. Two, addressing the ease of doing business so that the economy can grow on a continuous basis. Three, wastage, corruption, and wastage in government. One of the main threats to an economy that works for all is corruption. Unfortunately, the fight against corruption has been hampered by weak institutional framework and lack of political goodwill. In order to address corruption, we propose the following. ensure adequate funding to the judiciary and investigative officers and the officers of the prosecutor and other related officers. Conduct continuous and random lifestyle audits. 3, strengthen the asset recovery mechanisms so that there is immediate but just seizure of any wealth that is not consistent with public declarations when returns are filed. This will improve the accuracy and quality of those returns. Mr. Chairman, let me just highlight, when we talk of the judiciary, for instance, you look at the numbers, maybe you've had access to them. We are having cases, and I'm sure there are lawyers here like Paul Mwangi, where if you have an issue as a land case today, and you went to the land, the bench that deals with the land matters, they are likely to give you your hearing date or your mention date in the year 2021. Because you want to handle some land matter for your client. Now, this is a crisis. Land is an integral part of our economy. So if somebody who has a dispute or has an issue with a land matter, maybe the bank wants to have it as collateral and so forth, but you're being told we can have your first hearing in 2021. What are we telling Kenyans? These are very serious issues. We propose the development of a comprehensive policy and legislative framework. If it is there, it needs to be strengthened, that facilitates comprehensive measures in climate change adaptation and mitigation. Enforce environmental protection laws, especially in the face of rapid urbanization. It's by sheer coincidence, this is our proposal, but when you look at the headlines in the last few days, you look at what is happening in Lake Victoria, you look at what is happening in other areas, we are in a crisis. Rural areas are becoming rapidly urban, and there's a serious gap between that change, that shift, and what we are doing to deal with environmental issues. It is a crisis. We propose that a proper environmental fund be set up to marshal resources towards environmental protection. This would include conservation of key water towers, increasing forest cover, and keeping the environment. We are quick to quote what are called international standards when it comes to forest cover and what have you, but we are short when it comes to translating some of those international standards to protect our environment. Mr. Chairman, let me come to the final component, governance. This is the one that looks easy on political platforms because there are so many experts on matters of governance. So everybody who stands on a platform has his view, but sometimes they say what looks easiest becomes the most difficult to deal with. Let me address myself to what we might call the proposed system of government. Mr. Chairman, the structure of the executive arm of government must uphold and respect the principle of one person, one vote. We, as ANC, are strictly opposed to any attempt to create multiple, conflicting, or ambiguous centers of state authority. The head of state must also be the head of government and commander-in-chief of the defense forces. the authority must not be shared or open to multiple interpretations. Accordingly, therefore, we support the recommendation by the BBI report for the establishment of a national executive structure in which the executive comprises of a president, who is both the head of state and government, as well as commander-in-chief of the defense forces, a deputy president, a prime minister, who is appointed by the president from the president's party, subject to approval by parliament. And the responsibilities of the prime minister must be clearly defined and safeguarded. And if need be, the prime minister can have a deputy or two deputies. But this needs to be clearly defined. Mr. Chairman, equally, we support your proposal of the establishment of the office of the official leader of opposition with a shadow cabinet corresponding to the official cabinet and funded by the national exchequer. I think that was a very rich proposal in the BBI report. Now, I want to say something about what I've just said, because there's been talk about how good the grand coalition government was. But I want to be realistic, because I lived it. Sometimes what is said is not what exactly happened. And I can tell you for free, for the Kenyans who may not know, that it reached a stage because roles were not properly defined. And the Grand Coalition government was a government that came out of necessity. We reached a stage where, when the Prime Minister was supposed to chair subcommittees of cabinet, if you are a PNU faction, sometimes they would feign commitment elsewhere. So we are supposed to look at what is happening, and there's a very critical issue on the agenda. The minister responsible does not turn up. If the minister responsible is not there, clearly you cannot discuss the issue. Now, this seesaw went on. It weighed down the Prime Minister. I and Uhuru were deputy prime ministers. We were supposed to chair subcommittees sometimes on behalf of the Prime Minister. When he's not there, if Uhuru is not there, maybe the ODM ministers disappear. Sometimes when I chair, the PNU ministers disappear. So we developed a situation where there was always a lack of quorum. These are the practical things that sometimes people may not know. And in the process, slowly, the whole ethos of cabinet and subcommittees of cabinet just dissipated. So this is why I'm emphasizing that the need for a very clear definition of the role of these offices as we propose them, their limitations, their functionality, is something that needs to be looked at very, very critically. Otherwise, we will be creating a bureaucracy that will not be able to function. So this is a point that I leave with you. And by the way, sometimes because the PS, the minister was supposed to come with the PS, the minister sometimes does not turn up but sends the PS. The PS then says, sorry, I don't sit in cabinet, I'm a technical person. So if the minister is not there, I cannot proceed. The minister sometimes comes, his PS is not there, and he says, this is a technical issue. If my PS is not there, I cannot offer help. So these were the... Now, that is filibustering. So let us create a structure where there shall be no filibustering when it comes to the responsibility that we owe the Kenyan public. Mr. Chairman, I want to, getting closer to the end, I want to state that as ANC, we fully support your proposal that the 47 counties remain as they are. We have reached a stage where people have been given their counties, and again, to take it away may not be very wise. Let us develop mechanisms of enhancing efficiency going forward, but let us not take away the counties as they are. Mr. Chairman, we are very categorical that as ANC we are against the introduction of a third tier of government, as has been suggested by some BBI popularization public rallies or some speakers at those rallies. We cannot afford to burden Kenyans with another tier of government. We recommend that the Schedule 4 of the Constitution, which deals with unbundling, classification, and the issues of functions, be implemented to the letter, because this is not happening, and it's undermining devolution. One such example is in education, where functions such as infrastructure in both primary and secondary schools, such as classrooms, labs, toilets, and teachers' houses, should be assigned to county governments. We also want to emphasize that we should entrench the principle of funds follow functions. We note that while this principle has been inscribed in the Constitution of Kenya 2010, it has not always been adhered to. The national government has stood in the way of funds following functions. This is the case, for instance, in the health, roads, and water sector. It should be an offense for anyone to stand in the way of funds following functions. And ladies and gentlemen of the steering committee, it may be interesting for you to note that the budget of the Ministry of Health at the national government continues to grow. And yet functions of health are supposed to be devolved. These are very interesting contradictions. And this is why we are having serious controversies about procurement in the Ministry of Health. Right at the national level, there are a lot of issues now before the Senate Committee and others, and the Public Accounts Committee about procurement, because the national government does not want to let go in accordance with the Constitution. So who is benefiting from this procurement that is being retained at the center? We support the BBI's recommendation that a minimum of 35% of resources or the revenue that is collected based on the formula for revenue allocation, it is now stands at a minimum of 15%, but it's logical that this be upped, and in the BBI report you make such a recommendation.